Computer. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Coffee with Convery. Today's conversation is for anyone who's ever asked themselves, am I on the right path? What if I want to pivot? How do I connect with what I'm studying to the real world? Because here's the truth. Careers today are no longer linear. I'm excited to welcome Jake Effoduh. Jake is an assistant professor at the Lincoln Alexander School of Law, where his work focuses on artificial intelligence, technology law, and international human rights. His journey spans global institutions, including the World Economic Forum, Carnegie Mellon University, and leadership roles in AI policy and human rights across Africa and Canada. From practicing law to shaping conversations on AI governance and equity, Jake represents what it means to build a career with purpose and perspective. Jake, welcome to Coffee with Convery.
Thank you very much. Thanks so much for having me. I'm such a big fan of this, so I'm happy to be on your platform. I'm really excited about the work you're doing.
Thank you.
Even for me, I get a lot of inspiration from this. So being here, I'm like, okay, this is it's like a fan being on their favorite show. So
Thank
thank you so much.
you. Yeah, and it's been a while. I'm so glad we're here today. So let me start with some
Yes.
rapid fire stuff. What is your
Okay.
superpower?
My superpower. Two things. One, I never get full. Like I can eat as big as I want. And then I think another superpower I have, I would say translation. And I'm not talking about languages, even though yeah, I could speak some indigenous languages of my origin, but I mean being able to take something very dense and maybe a little scary. It could be a treaty, a law, a policy
Mhm.
paper, and then handing it back, in a way that is small enough to maybe fit into your pocket, small enough for you to understand, in a way that I can explain to my aunt, maybe who sells fabric in the village, or I could explain to my students who come from a different area of interest, but they find themselves in law school. And sometimes I'm able to translate these things even in ways that I might not have envisioned,
Mhm.
but even in ways that I don't understand it myself, and I have to translate it to myself to understand that way I can translate it to others to understand. So I find translation to be something I would say my superpower, aside eating a lot.
I love that. I love that. It's so important in today's world to have that skill. That's amazing. Thinking about school itself, when you were in school, what was your favorite subject?
Oh, good. Literature. I did,
Literature.
yeah, literature. I mean, everyone assumes a future lawyer must have loved like debate or, something, but I loved stories. I loved stories. I loved poems. My dad read me a lot of poems. And it turns out that law is just storytelling with a much stricter grammar, right? But I also
Right.
loved food and nutrition. There's a course called food and nutrition. I loved it because, well, in my days, you either had to do agriculture or food and nutrition, and the agric student would go to the farm to plant the things, and the food and nutrition student will cook the food. I'm like, I'm doing food and nutrition.
There you go. There you go. Table,
Mhm.
right to table, farm to
Yes.
table. Um, Thinking about first jobs, a lot of the audience listening are either starting their first summer job or
Mm.
maybe just completed their first job, but we all start somewhere. What was your very first job?
My very first job was radio. And I said that was my very first serious job. And how I got that job on radio was I was looking for what you would call a summer job. And there was a new detergent that just came through. And they were looking for people who would go to the market and sell the detergent to people. Like, you need to, like, this detergent can do this. It could, I was just being very comical. And there was an award for who sold the most pack of detergent. So I was like, this detergent can wash anything. It can wash this and that. And I'm doing a demo right there. And, while I was doing that, somebody said, oh, there's this radio show you could sort of audition for. And I didn't know it was like a BBC radio show. I mean, if I did, I would not have even
Amazing.
gone for the audition, because I had no media training. I didn't speak very fluent English. But the show itself, I happened to be a fan of the show. And so I just went to the audition to even see what that looked like. And it was an audition of over, I think there were over 300 or 400 people, and they were looking for just one person. Again, how I got selected was, I don't know if it's serendipity or just random luck, whatever it is, but the point was, I loved the show. And I think sometimes people don't connect loving something with being able to do it. And for some reason, yeah, they I mean, they selected me, and then suddenly I started speaking. Of course, it was very difficult for me because I also grew up with a speech impediment. I
Okay.
stuttered. Yeah, I stuttered a lot, and I still stutter. But it was powerful because I love stories, and radio gave me the opportunity to tell stories and to share stories. And so a conversation I would just enjoy with friends
Yeah.
turned out to be enjoyed by other people as well. So I wasn't critical about like, oh, my voice or how I was pronouncing the words very well, but radio gave me a phenomenal platform, especially as a kid who was very shy, very to myself. The radio was anonymized. Like people did not know who I was. And I loved it. I went to work
Amazing.
even when I didn't need to be. They were like, "You went to be off today." I was like, "Yeah, I just came by to like play with the microphones or just do whatever." So I loved radio. And I started when I was about, I think, 16.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I ended up
Wow.
doing it for more than 12 years.
Yeah. Well, I know just listening to you though, I could see you have a radio voice. I mean, I
So
think
it's
you got
not as good as your voice. And I must say, I
I
think
don't know. I don't know. I
I
think you
lost
got
my
the
voice because I was shouting at the football match yesterday. So I apologize.
right off the match, so no problem. One last rapid fire question, and we'll get into your background. If you had to pick a word to describe yourself, one word, or what would it be?
Hmm. Hmm. I was going to say shock absorber, but that's, let me just say curious. I would say I'm a very curious
Curious. Yep.
person,
Yep.
possibly to a fault. I think curiosity is what led me to have, a background, like a CV that looks like a passport, a passport that fell into a blender. Think about it. Like I have some communications experience, I have academic, I have legal practice. There's all these things mashed up into one. And it's because of my curiosity. Um, I'm always I'm always trying to look at like why is this thing shiny
Yeah.
and that's how I got into AI and teaching technology law. Like, what is this technology?
I, I I can't wait to jump into that. I think that's fascinating, and I think that's what the world's about, staying curious, right? And exploring those things. And like you said, why is this thing shiny? Let's check it
Right.
out.
Let's check it out.
So before AI, law, human rights, and everything you're doing today, I want to take it back a little bit to the beginning. Where did everything start for you?
Hmm. It started somewhere nobody would have placed a bet. I was born in Lagos, Nigeria. And, I was obviously born in a place called Festac, Lagos. It was a very socioeconomically deprived environment, very hugely competitive, very dense. But as a kid, I was just fascinated by everything. I remember just standing on the balcony and just looking at people rushing, going all about. My parents would be like, they were just worried about me, like this kid, would he ever do anything? Because in Lagos, you had to strive, you had to like hustle for everything. But I was the last of four children, and I was like maybe the slowest. And I also didn't speak
Hmm.
very well, so they just let me there. But I spent most of my time in other parts of Nigeria. I went to secondary school in the northern part of the country. My parents never had a formal education themselves, so
Hmm.
very academically educated, and so they felt that missing piece was something they wanted to close for their kids, right? So they very at the very early age decided, you need to do something academic. So even though I wanted to, play and design things and paint and, play some sports, my parents were like, you have to go to school. And here is the part people don't really expect. I didn't dream of law. In fact, as a teenager, I wanted to do something with my hands or do something I just wanted to be more practical, more creative. The legal career was there, but I remember having a conversation with my dad where I said, I mean, typical African parents, they always like, you better get a degree. I told my dad, like, I could dance because I danced very well and I could do all this. And my dad was like, tell me how many dancers are still dancing at 45 or 50. And he's like, tell me how many lawyers are doing that. I mean, he was very open-minded in allowing
Yeah.
me do whatever I wanted to do, but he was just like, I need to push you as your parent to see how you might be able to leverage academia, how you might leverage, something more professional. You could be a lawyer in your 80s and you could still, like produce value. And I saw reasons with it because I think a lot of young people sometimes are like, I want to do this. I'm a great photographer. And I have students who come to law school who are like, I don't even know what I'm doing here. And I laugh. I'm like, you would figure out that there's a lot of things you can do as a lawyer, even with your talent and your skill. And this idea that you have to be a certain level of intelligence or you have to read so much is all it's all ridiculous. The best lawyers are the most creative, the most out of the box, the most unconventional, right?
Right.
I started out radio not because I loved radio, but because I had to get a job as a teenager. And then I fell in love with, with the job, so to speak. Again, being curious, I loved just the transformative nature of how stories could impact lives. And one of the things that kept me in radio was because I just hated to sit in the studio. I would take the microphone, it was called a mini disc at the time. I would travel places and just sit in the meat market with the women and just discuss their husbands' cheating behaviors and how they are coping with it. Or I would take the microphone to the mechanics and these men are just complaining about like just different things. And I would take them back and piece them into a story. And I would also share what the journey was like for me. So I had like poorly quality radio output. Sometimes the BBC editorial team will be like, that's not quality for broadcast. I'll be like, well, but people have conversations when the rain is falling, or like it's why should we have a perfect, crispy, clear? So I
Yep.
was I was such an outlier, but it did attract people to the realities of what it was. And the radio show just kept sort of growing. But the truth is, I was learning. I was learning to speak as a timid child, as somebody with a speech defect. I was learning to pause, to breathe, to learn to speak. It was my own platform to be better at myself.
Hmm.
And even when I finally got into law school, I was like, this is quite a challenge for me. But I was in that whole in my ambition of trying to like be curious to challenge myself. I fell in love, with law, although I fell in love with it towards the end of my academic journey. But as you can see now, I'm teaching law, and so I think people say, "Oh, how are you so good with the students?" Or like, "What is it you're doing?" I'm not such a great teacher, but I know how to connect with people who feel like they're out of water or like
Hmm.
they're doing something that they don't even know what the next step looks like. And I think you and I share that ambition sort of. We're like, yeah, we've
Yeah.
done so many things and we're fine and we're doing great. You don't have to have everything figured out, right? So
Yeah.
that's been my little journey as to how everything started from Nigeria. And when I became a lawyer, I did work in Nigeria. I did all kinds of law practice. Trust me, I did everything that a lawyer would be able to do. And then I realized I just felt insufficient when there were issues I did not know so much about. So I became ripe to do a master's degree, and I did luckily get scholarship to study at the University of Oxford for my master's. I thought that would be an exciting experience, which it was, but I didn't expect the rigor and the imposter syndrome I felt
Mm.
moving from
Yep.
Nigeria to the UK to do a master's degree at the University of Oxford with colleagues who had traveled the world for like I remember in class, someone would say, for example, if you go to Colombia and you see this, and everyone would nod their head because and I'm Googling what's the capital of Colombia, what part of the world is it? Like, I'm trying to catch up to what they thought was general knowledge before I connect to the literature itself. But it was a good experience. And then after that, I went back to Nigeria. But Canada has always been my destination since I was a kid. I've
Okay.
always said when I grow up, my goal in life is to become Canadian.
Hmm.
And my dad would be like, well, I remember anytime there's a Canadian flag, they'll be like, well, come see your future country. It was like my siblings were like, well, this dream, we don't know if it's gonna come to like fruition, but I've
Yeah.
always loved the Canadian spirit. I've loved the hockey team. There's this show on TV called Just for Laughs or Just for Gags.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It was broadcasted everywhere across Africa. So I just like, I want to be on this. Like, I really want to, move to Canada. So when I finished my master's degree and I applied for another grad program here, I was so excited to come here. And I acclimatized, I think, faster than others would have because I had already prepped myself before I came here. So I did study at Osgoode Hall Law School, PhD, and then now I teach at the Lincoln Alexander School of Law.
Yeah. No, fantastic journey. And I'm curious because there are, and I too came to Canada from the US, and I know other people that have made their trek, if you will, to Canada. The, can you take us through the journey? Like, what was it really like navigating a new country and building your
Hmm.
career for you?
It's tough, even for the
Yeah.
most advanced, whatever it is, coming to a new country feels like you're being reborn again.
Yep.
Because to be honest with you, I had to disconnect from Nigeria, which felt like a part of me was dying. I was used to a certain way of, in fact, the time zones are currently different. Like the time when Nigerians are waking up is already midday here. So like you're not even connect with the routine or the people that you're familiar with. You're in a completely different space, geographically speaking, new weather, new culture, new everything. But it's also like migration sometimes is marketed as an upgrade.
Hmm.
Um, uh, but then no one talks about the demolition part of it. Like I had built a name in Nigeria, I had studied
Yeah.
extensively. And then I landed in Canada and I discovered that what I cared or carried the most about does not automatically convert. My law degree, I had to begin again, but another master's degree, I'd also go to law school. You have great experience. Wow, but is it Canadian experience though? You become a beginner in a place where you used to be somebody. And it takes a lot of humility to accept that, right?
Yeah.
But I was willing to do it. I think I spent the better half of my first 2 years simply just requalifying, reading again,
Yeah.
and I love Canadian education because it's of a very high quality. Canadians are the most educated people in the world. You can Google it. I think after us is Japan. So I had to relearn, like the framing at which I look at the law and what the law means began to it was very helpful for me. So there are evenings where I quietly questioned like the entire decision.
Hmm.
But I think what carried me was some form of resilience or confidence, so to speak. I just kept reminding myself where I was from, why I wanted to be here. And then I stopped seeing myself as somebody who was starting over. I started seeing myself as someone who was running a different operating system, right? I understood Toronto to be like Lagos in Nigeria. I understood, um, I tried to fixate my life and my experience. And I think that double vision gave me the ability to sort of begin a new process here. But I think patience was important,
Yep.
finding connection here, and just being willing to learn, being willing to, sometimes I'll say some things and my students will laugh, and I'm like, what does that mean? They're like, it means something like, it means it's different. But I like the fact that I can hold place in two different regimes or regions. Like, there's no
Hmm.
credit card system in Nigeria. I didn't like the whole finance structure, what qualifies as value, the way we even see time. In Nigeria, timing is a bit more relaxed. It's about we care more about space and individual connection as opposed to time. Um,
Hmm.
and in Nigeria, food is a commons. Like we yes, we purchase food, but food is not something you and I could be enemies, but at least I should be able to eat when I come. Like food is something that has a different value
Connects.
here. Yeah,
Yeah.
like we can connect with it. But I've learned so much. I have also contributed my quota. I think I'm contributing my quota to the Canadian community. I'm such a lover of Toronto. Have traveled to maybe up to 100 countries, but I can't wait to get back to Toronto every time. And people are like, really? It's funny when Canadian or people in Toronto don't realize that this is one of the best cities in the world to live in. I love this city with my whole heart. I can take a walk in Toronto for 5 hours and not get tired.
Yeah.
So I love this city. It took me a while to find myself emotionally, psychologically, culturally, and I'm still finding myself. I'm still learning and building, and it's still a journey, really.
Yeah.
As an African, as a Black person in this country, you sometimes will be reminded of where you're from. Sometimes, like people will still ask, like people asked me yesterday, did you come all the way from FIFA? I was like, no, I live here, But yeah, I'm grateful for what this country has offered me, and I'm grateful for the people and the connections. And I hope more people who are finding themselves in new spaces. I have students who I had to write reference letters to go study master's program in the US,
Okay.
or they go study in Kenya. And I always do a one-pager document where I'm encouraging them. I say, that letter is for your reference, but here is my letter to you. You're going to experience life in a new terrain. These things are going to be different. People are going to look at you differently. And a student of mine was quite teary, like talking to me on the phone. And I was like, I've lived that. I know what it is to be the best and brightest from TMU. And you go to a different country, and what you're challenged with is not the pedagogical capacity, it's about something else.
Yeah.
So I'm very grateful for my experiences so far.
Yeah. And in looking at your experience, I know we were talking a little bit about sometimes listeners on this podcast are, I don't want to say worried, but sometimes just kind of built up around career paths and where they're headed and what's going to happen. And I mean, when I look at, your career path from law to human rights to AI to academia, um, what were key moments that shaped your direction in those different pivots, I guess, and sharing that with the audience? Because I think that's the way to experience life, in my opinion, is try different things, be curious, continue that curiosity. But at the same time, we also sometimes are very much in the Northern culture pre-programmed about you must know what you're going to do, where you're going to go, how you're going to do it. And I don't think anyone really
Yeah.
knows that. But yeah, curious about your direction, how you got where you're going.
I mean, I would love to give you a polished version, like where I saw it all coming, but the truth is it's far messier. I mean, if you showed a teenage me, 18, 19-year-old me, this career, I'll assume you had the wrong file. I mean, there was no master vision for me. There were just hinges. Radio taught me that information can change a life, but I kept slamming into the limits of awareness. Okay, when you expose a human rights violation, for example, or when people don't know their rights, but now that they do, how do they claim them, right? So I had those
Mm,
stories of like people experiencing really difficult moments in their life and their families, and no one is taking it seriously. And I would like, yes, I need to bring this to the public, attention. And then it gets the attention. It still wasn't justice. So I just knew I wanted to go into law. I needed to get nearer to power. And so when I started to do human rights work, I kept noticing that I was fulfilling something. A new actor in the room now makes decisions about people, right?
hmm
And I could influence that. So when AI picked up quite critically, I did not waste time to latch in. I was like, algorithms have so much power and so much influence because they are designed systems. And so these algorithms are deciding, who gets a loan, who gets flagged, who gets believed, who gets justice, but nobody elected them. And most
mm,
lawyers couldn't see this. And so that's how I followed the problem into AI. But to be honest with you, I didn't have a trajectory. What I had this mantra, like my dad would always say, whatever your hands find to do, just do it well. So I remember like radio for me was a job. I was like, let me just do it while I was marketing that detergent, and then like this radio job has come through. I was like, this radio job is good if it can guide me through paying through my university
yeah.
fees. And when I got into law school and I finished, I was still doing the radio program when I joined the law firm. Now, nobody knew I was the one on radio because I had a different name. But the more I kept going to court, some of my colleagues were like, it definitely is you. There's no way you would tell me that laughter, the pause, it's you. And I was like, yeah, it's me. And there were two reactions in the law firm. I had a couple of bosses who were like, this is ridiculous. You need to focus on your law practice. Stop this radio thing. And I had colleagues who were like, that is amazing. Wow. So when we leave work on Friday, you could go on Saturday and do this radio thing. That is absolutely amazing. Like it was very polarized. And sometimes when like the radio actually held me to the ground because I was in this big law firm where I couldn't decide where the briefs were coming from. They were all big corporates. I just didn't feel a sense of doing anything
hmm
justice oriented. But radio kept my vision alive even while I was a lawyer, right? Of course, I had to let the radio go at some point, but I never really chose a field.
hmm
I always just chased a question, and the question kept changing its address. So I don't think the clarity arrived before the journey because I think a lot of people just feel like, I want to know what I'm doing. I want to know, should I do this or should I'm like, yeah, the clarity doesn't always arrive before the journey. The clarity is the journey.
Yeah,
So you don't think your
100%
way to
true.
purpose like from your classroom or the bedroom. No, I think you bump into it by doing things. I tell my student, how do you know you're not going to like insurance law? How do you know you're not going to like tax? Oh my God, like you just have a preconceived notion like tax is going to be boring. How do you know? Like how do you know you wouldn't like to work in housing equity? How do you know you would not be a great fertility lawyer? Like the the law and the world is so vast that you can only know by doing things and sometimes even doing the wrong things. Because sometimes you
Yeah.
do the thing and you realize, I don't want to do
Yep.
that.
Yeah.
And I tell my friends and my students, sometimes you know when the feeling stops feeling like work. So if you don't have a 5-year plan, relax. I never did. I don't think you ever had a 5-year plan.
Never.
I've had like 5 days curiosity that I've repeated for 20 years. And I think
Right.
that's where I am at the moment.
Yeah, no, it's I really love the following the question. And I'm thinking about my next question I wanted to ask you was really around thoughts and advice you can give to students navigating transitions. Because it's high school to post-secondary to your first job,
Mm.
these are pretty big moments in your life. And sometimes you're really not sure, what to ask or what to say or what to do. But any thoughts around that high school to post-secondary and people feeling maybe uncertain about their futures?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on the academic standards committee of my university, and we keep thinking about, we're trying to understand, not only as academics, but from a psychological perspective, what are students thinking before they come into university? And it's amazing
Yeah.
that we ask people to pick a program at 17 with a brain that science says won't finish forming until about 25. So we make you choose the door before we hand you the map. So actually,
Yeah.
most students feel uncertain. There are a few people who are like, I want to be a neuroscientist. This is what I've been since 5 years old. Like, there are a few of those, but then how do you know this is exactly what you want to do? So if you feel uncertain, you're not behind. You're definitely awake. There's a reason why you're uncertain, and you need to interrogate what that reason is, right?
Yeah.
So on program versus mindset, the specific program matters far less than what the brochure suggests. I've watched some philosophy majors run fintech companies.
Yeah.
I've seen computer scientists who become poets, right? I think what compounds is not the subject. I think it's the mind you build while you're studying it. So the way some universities or most universities try to operate is the first year is not your determining factor. If you notice, most first year courses, you can oscillate from one field to
Mhm.
the other. You're doing most general courses. Of course, you have some core requirements. And I always ask students to please take advantage of um, the services around guidance and counseling and like course advisors, because sometimes you just realize that, wow, whilst you're in a science program, you just find yourself to be loving the elective courses more than the core courses. Or maybe you find the elective courses to be distraction because you're so connected to the core of it. These things tell you something you should not ignore. So choose something that teaches you to think. And that's, for me, I think that's the goal. Choose something that is exciting for you. Choose something that helps you think, and then you can, if it's a technical skill, you can learn the technical skill later. Like my dad told me, he's like, I know you want to do theater arts. I know you want to dance and you want to do all this entertaining thing because you're energetic, but you can do those without the degree. Like one thing he sold me on, he said, you can be a dancer, an actor, and I'm not saying the academic like version of it is not worthwhile. It is,
Mhm.
but you can still do those things while you're in law school. Like who says you can't go for dance class? Because he's looking at me, he goes, and my dad was very honest. He was like, I don't. People laugh when I say it. My dad is like, you're great at dancing, but like you're not like it's not like the bread and butter of what you do. And he's right. Like, for a father, he's like, I wish I could tell you you're the best. You are my best, but like you're not so good that I'm like, don't go to school, go to dance. No, I don't think you're there yet. Right. So I don't want you to be consumed by what you're obsessed with now and to invest so much time and resources that we don't have so much of. So I would say beyond academics, the grades aren't on the list the way you'd assume it to be. Learn school teaches you to think, teaches you to connect, teaches you, challenges you. It's not meant to be like, what's going to be the easiest for me? What would I like? There's some courses you're not going to like, but you should learn it.
Right.
Right. And whatever you learn from university never depreciates. So you will learn not just from the kind and the honest ones, you would also learn from the difficult parts that you've taken. So do something real, do something small. When you're in school, there are projects, there are clubs, there are jobs you can do. I have law students who are law students, but they work in retail.
Yep.
I know a law student who does graffiti for people's houses. And I'm like, wow, like so many layers to an individual that were just like, if you don't pick the right course, you're going to ruin your life. That's not true,
Right.
right?
No,
It's
you're
yeah,
100% right with
that's not
that.
true. So let I think students need to give themselves more grace and
Yes.
more leverage to live life and try out things. And even when you're in your first year, your second year, you can change, you can move around, you can switch
100%.
courses. It's all doable.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think that's, again, it goes back to this sort of like pre-programming of life and like this rush to get out of school and get your job and get to, like, take your time. Like,
Mm.
look at it, learn. Like you said, there's going to be stuff you're not going to like that you have to take, but that's what life's about. You
Mhm.
learn from those experiences.
Yeah.
I think the other thing I'm curious to hear from you on is outside of the classroom, like, thinking about, I've been at many conferences talking about the future of work and the future of work. And, you know, I get the concept, but the future of work is also right now.
Mhm.
It's so
Yes.
in my head, I'm thinking when I provide advice or thoughts or perspectives mostly to students from my thoughts, but like what do you think about what they should be preparing themselves for beyond just the classroom?
Um, this is very interesting. I think this is a moment, this age of like
It's
technological
changing.
explosion,
Yeah.
it's everything is changed. Everything
Yeah.
has changed. So everyone has gone back to the drawing board. And I tell my law students this, I'm like, yes, it's a very challenging time, but it's also a window of opportunity for you. The work starts now. There are lawyers who have been constitutional law experts for 25 years, or lawyers who have
Yeah.
worked in insurance law for 25 years. You can never know as much as they do.
Yeah.
But right now, with AI and quantum computing and nanotechnology and biotech and Internet of Things, everyone is back to the drawing board. We're all like, ha, what is this? And
Yeah.
so, like you said, there's no future of work. The work is now. How are you navigating your lived experience right now? How do you engage with technology? How do you engage? For example, I was at the store and I realized that, most stores now really want to have your email address or your phone number to give you a receipt. And I'm just like, this is crazy. Like,
I know.
and people are just like doling out their, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but and then we complain about like, oh, things like surveillance pricing and, so I even ask my students, I was like, I remember the times where we all paid the same price for the same product, but right now we don't. If you and I were to take a flight to Cairo, you would see a different price. I would see a different price. Why is your price different from my price? So I don't have to I don't have to open textbooks to like learn some 1942 principle to teach in class. I begin my class with a real lived experience.
Yeah.
I tell everyone there's an exercise I do in my when I want to talk about like, data protection and I
Yeah.
want to talk about the impact of cookies and browsing history and like the footprints people leave when they use certain like digital systems. I say, okay, guys, we're all booking a flight from Toronto to Montreal and let's just randomly look and then we see different prices and we do all the prices on the board and we try to figure out why is your price the highest and why is your price the lowest, and it's I can use that example to begin to teach people, but also sometimes the students are the ones even teaching me like, oh, look how this is why mine is like the girl who was like, oh, mine is the cheapest. Guess what, I use a private browser. Guess what, I delete this. Guess what, I don't join. Like I'm like, wow, like we're learning together as we go.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
there is no, I think it's we need to realize that it's already happening and knowledge is as like knowledge mobilization has changed, so
Hmm.
also is knowledge generation, so also is the value people ascribe to like certain things. So like more than ever school has become so important. I remember when people used to say, well, it's all about the degree, like what you get out of it. It's all about the employability. I don't want to go to school because I want to be employable. That's just a lowest common denominator.
That's
I want
right.
to go to school because I want to connect. I want to think. And I tell my students, whenever would you pick Foucault to read? Like no one just goes like, I'm bored, let me read Foucault. Or like, when are you going to read about a certain country or a certain policy? Like it would never happen except you're in school. So please go to school so you could expand your mind, you can challenge yourself. And even if a curriculum is not relevant, oh, I don't see this curriculum to be relevant. Who does this in real life? Yeah, go make it relevant. Learn contract law, and then who does by post anymore? We don't do post anymore, but that same contract law learning. You put it to your terms of service when you click agree on any mobile device or app you're downloading,
That's
right?
right.
So these are some of the things I think we need to come to realize that knowledge has become decentralized. And so there's different ways to learn and accumulate knowledge.
Yep.
We're,
Yeah.
we're, we're all relearning in this new age of digital explosion.
Yeah. No, exactly. It's a whole new landscape. The other thing I wanted to get some thoughts on you from is there's a good portion of people who listen to this podcast too as someone who's maybe done a certain thing and now they're like, I want to pivot in my career.
Mm,
I recently did that in the last year. I left corporate
okay.
academia to work in charity nonprofit, right? It's completely different industry, completely different perspectives. Any thoughts around people who want to pivot in their career and who might be afraid of making that wrong move?
I think if you're feeling stuck and behind, I would say, first of all, breathe, because what a lot of people consider behind assume there's one race to one's finish line, and there really isn't. I think sometimes comparison is the thief of joy. Because
Yep.
every time people say, I want to pivot, I feel like I try to interrogate why. You're not just on the road you assumed you'll be on, and that's okay sometimes. Um, I think the fear that the wrong move usually rests on is mostly a fantasy. There's this idea that successful people made the right moves. No, I don't think anybody who's well, most successful people did not make a right move. They just made moves. They learned and they correct. Every time my students say like, "Oh wow, we're so impressed to see this award of yours. We're so impressed to see this grant of yours, to see this accomplishment of yours," and I'm just like, because I like to be real with my students, I'm like, I am the least person that I would consider myself like successful or like brilliant. I just fall 7 times and I stand up 8. So
Yeah.
then you just see me standing, but then you just think like he's always just so like no. And And I think this is where this pivot quietly sabotages people, right? You look at 15 years in, you say like banking, and you decide it's wasted because you want something else. I think that's wrong. Skills are far more portable than job titles. So a
That's
banker
great.
understands
Yeah.
risk, a banker understands trust and how
Yeah.
money truly moves. And that's gold dust in 100 other fields. I went from radio to law, and now I'm teaching tech and AI, and people assumed I restarted each time. No, I didn't. I carried something across every line. The storytelling from radio is the only reason I can make an AI policy make sense to my undergrad student. Nothing was wasted. It was just all luggage. I carried them as I go. So it's a lot of people wondering, like, oh my God, what am I throwing away? You should be asking, what am I carrying across? Um, Sometimes when people are talking about pivoting, there's something they're not interrogating well. Maybe they're looking at somebody else. Maybe and I say move, like we're not trees. One of the luck we have is that we can move. We're not just planted in one area. People are thinking about what am I going to lose? No, you're not going to lose much. You're going to carry those things
Yeah.
across. So you're not erasing your past, you're putting it to a higher use. And sometimes you don't get the promotion until you pivot, right? So you're not starting over. I think the strategy is where the nitty-gritty is. You're starting from something, you're starting to something, but you're not starting over. So people who need to pivot, it's pivot if you can, pivot if you will, but understand what it is you're doing. You're not pursuing a goal or career line. You're not comparing, as long as you're not comparing yourself with somebody else, putting pressure on yourself, you're supposed to achieve this by this, achieve that by that. Nah. As long as you feel like you're leveraging from one platform to the other, you're advancing your career, you're opening a new vista using what you have already into that new space, then that's brilliant.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I wondered if you could take a few minutes with your experience in AI and, it's all the buzz. Everyone's talking about it, right? Everyone's thinking about it. People trying to avoid it, people who I don't know, I've always been an early adopter, so I kind of lean into it, look at how it can help me. What's your thoughts around AI, law, ethics? And
Hmm.
yeah, curious. Just
I am a pessimist. I started as a Luddite. Like I'm not one who's like excited about technology. Yes, I love new things. And I like so how did I get into AI? I started doing my PhD at Osgoode Hall Law School, and I was looking at environmental justice impacts as outputs from courts. And as a World Economic Forum expert on human rights, I got invited to this groundbreaking conference in Tianjin, China. It's a
Wow.
meeting, it's called the annual meeting of the new champion. There's like all the big tech developers who are working in AI and all this, and they get to meet and they just share their groundbreaking technology. I was like, I'm going for that. Let's go see what they have to do. And then I got there, my mind was blown. This was 2015. And they were these gadgets people were on their head, and you would use your mind, your memory to move a ball. They were like products where you speak into a mic for like 1 minute and it diagnoses your entire I was like, what is going on? This is as far back as 2015. These are models and systems that have not been released to the public. And in all this excitement, quantum computing, robotics, biomimicry, no one was talking about like human rights, or like nobody in a conference of about 2,000 people. The city was shut. In fact, that city went on public holiday because of that conference, and they do it every year. I was like, absolutely not. I came back to Canada and like, I'm changing my topic. I am going to change my topic. Everything AI, I am going to learn about this. And I started to research around how would AI systems affect the legitimacy of certain legal principles. And people are like, what are you talking about? It's just going to be like, no. And I'm happy. I'm happy. In fact, when I was rounding up my like thesis, it was almost like I didn't even need to do a conclusion, because when I started to do my field work and now that I'm writing the summary, like everything just panned out the way that I said, how AI systems would affect. Even people talk about this like brain rot, which I think is a bit quite is alarmist, but I'm just saying AI systems have affected certain aspects of legal legitimacy. And that's where we are today. And how do we sort of deal with it? So I'm not a pessimist. I'm not really an optimist when it comes to AI. I'm more of a pragmatist. I see areas where AI systems can and should advance the human
Yeah.
condition. And I see areas of AI systems deliberately going far and beyond the scope of what they should go. And all of this is because there's a lack of adequate governance or regulation.
Hmm.
Last week, I was telling a friend that there are now AI agents that are hiring humans, because sometimes AI agents might need to bypass a verification tool, right? So the agents would hire humans to say, could you click on these boxes and click the bicycles or the traffic lights for me for
Yeah,
$2?
yeah, 100%. I know what you mean.
And
Yeah,
people are doing those jobs. So this is I for excitedly I tell my law students we're all going to be rich, not me, them, because all of these things just introduces new areas of legal
yeah,
questions, legal debate, legal suits, and all that. But also, um, we should it's almost like we need to do two things. We need to embrace what technology can do for us. Why do we have to read 500 documents if we want to figure out what is the most significant or how many times this word was used? Like, we don't have to do that. We can get an AI tool to just like how many times this word was used, summarize, da 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 da. But we should be wary about how it things like deep fakes, how like
yeah,
misinformation and disinformation. In fact, I was reading a psychology paper last night that says even when we see a deep fake video and we know it's deep fake, we cannot psychologically remove what we've learned from it.
right.
Like you cannot unring a bell. Like it's already there. So even the impact is already even like, oh, it's fake, but there's just something your mind registers.
That's right.
And so those are the things I feel like we need to like dance around, like, okay, we would use the tech for this, and then this we need to be very wary about. And that's what the law should be doing. And I think that's why I'm so passionate about getting my students to understand this, because even the lawyers who are trained in law school before now can't understand it. They're not really trained for the time like this.
No,
So they just don't know how to do it. But lawyers in law school now and people who want to go to law school, please come to law school, not because like if you were creative, if you're curious, if you're angry, if you're whatever it is, if you're excited about tech, after they're like, I want to build the next thing, come.
right.
There's a course for that, yeah. And it's the opportunity to figure it out together, to develop the best rules, the best regulation, which no country has sort of figured out yet. So I'm a bit on the middle side. There are technologies. There are things I'm super excited about. You see me like, yes, yes. And there are things I'm like, I don't know. I don't know about that one. Maybe we might need to
Yeah.
think twice about it. So on one hand, just to give an example, I have been on like an advisory committee. I am currently on a UN AI governance committee, and what we're trying to do is to develop a lab, like build a lab where countries can come and help. We can help them build their regulation in a more in a scientific but socio-technical way.
Yeah.
But I've also declined being on the board of a brain machine interface. Like it's a technology, I know it's great. There's science behind it. I'm just like, I just don't know. Like I don't know if I have the qualifications to even be on this board for like a chip in the brain. And everyone's like, come on, don't be so like 1994. That's what someone said. I was like, yeah, it's okay. Like, I don't know. I just, yeah. So I'm also imperfect and I have my own biases as well. So I think I want more CEOs and more developers, more lawyers to sort of reflect on their biases. Like we all don't know what we're doing. We don't know where we're
Yeah.
going, but we can rely on each other's judgment, right?
100%. I agree. Well, first of all, Jake, thank you so much for being on this podcast. I have learned so much new things. Listening to your journey and your story is really inspiring. I really appreciate you taking the time to be part of the conversation for the audience that listens to this podcast. And I want to thank you so much for being on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I'm really grateful for the work that you do, for giving an audience to me and people like me, but also for sharing such a very, I love your podcast. Like I said, I'm a fan of it. I learn so much from it. And I think just even about you, learning about your story,
Thank
your
you.
passion, the way you support people, the work that you do for the communities that you serve is really inspiring. And I think those are the things that really make us whole. For me as a lawyer, when I was practicing, I remember going to dinners with friends who had like bought their big house, married, had kids, pets, have a swimming pool in the backyard. And I used to be like, what? What do you mean you're not happy? What? What do you mean you see a therapist? What this jump into the pool in the backyard? That's your therapy. Like I just
Exactly.
realized that they did not have anything that connected them to other people and to communities, and it's so relevant.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so thanks for your work, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be on this.
Thank you so much. And to our listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend, subscribe to the podcast, coffeetheconvery.com. You can also follow us on Instagram for more stories that stir both your head and your heart. This is Coffee Convery, where we remind you that success isn't always about climbing the corporate ladder. Sometimes it's about building your own jungle gym.
I like that.